And I don't know if you've seen this yet. It's been circling the internet, but this actress, she went to a red carpet event and she had this dress custom made. It was painted by an artist. I'm sure it took a ton of time. You can see it over here. It's absolutely beautiful. The face of Jesus. I'm sure it cost a bunch of money, but she wanted to showcase it while she walked up the red carpet and let everybody see the face of Jesus on display. But these security guards would not let her do it. Like over and over again, they kept telling her no. Like they kept picking it up and wadding it in a ball so nobody could see it. Like this is just absolutely crazy. Who are they to tell her that she can't, showcase this dress, or she's not allowed to show the face of Jesus? This is Hollywood for you. They hate Jesus. They're afraid of Jesus. Well, Jesus said, if you deny me in front of men, then I'll deny you in front of my Father in heaven. Like, this lady is amazing. She's not ashamed of the gospel. She's not ashamed of Jesus. If you're not ashamed of Jesus, then subscribe now.
If you're looking for a scary horror movie recommendation to watch tonight, then watch this. Because this is my go-to recommendation when somebody asks me for a scary horror film. So the movie's called Lovely Molly and it was released back in 2011. After Molly and her husband get married, they move into Molly's family home. And it's not long after they move in that things start to get really creepy. There is a presence in this house that's calling to Molly. It wants Molly. It's almost taunting her because this presence somehow knows Molly. And this movie documents Molly's fall into insanity because everywhere she goes, she's not safe. This thing has attached itself to her. This is a classic horror movie. What I mean by that is it uses classical methods to scare us. So this is a regular movie with little sections of found footage in it, or sections that we would class as found footage. We see a lot of the horror through a camera that either Molly or her husband is holding. And it's these sections that are the most terrifying. There are things that happen in this movie that you won't expect for a movie released in 2011. I feel like this movie was very much ahead of its time. I mean, it's quite a shocking movie in many respects. This movie is obviously inspired by movies like The Blair Witch Project. It's also inspired by movies like The Entity. It uses these films as inspiration whilst not ripping them off completely. The performances from both Molly and her husband are really good. In particular, Molly, who is played by Gretchen Lodge. You really believe that she's terrified. You really believe that this thing is after her. The conclusion to this film is shocking. One that I've not been able to get out of my head since I've seen it. That's why I return to this film so much, because I know it's going to scare me. Like I said before, this movie was quite ahead of its time. And for a horror movie released in 2011, it was saying quite a lot. This is a representation of childhood trauma. This movie represents childhood trauma and the memories we've suppressed as children, and how returning to a certain place can bring their memories to the surface again. This movie could also be seen as an allegory for addiction. Molly is a woman living in recovery, so the thing plaguing Molly could be seen as a representation of that addiction and the battle she has to go through daily to not fall back into a life she doesn't want to live, but also how tempting that life still feels to her, because this present is tempting her. Like I said, this is my go-to recommendation. If anybody asks me for a horror movie that's guaranteed to scare them, you should check it out. Let me know what you think.
We never really talked about Stephen Hawking, right?
No, not
but
really.
I just wanna talk about this real quick, because the most brilliant man in the world, people say like one of the most smartest people in the world, right? And he didn't believe in God, right? He didn't believe in like afterlife. He was an atheist.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? How was Stephen Hawking living? He was stuck in a yeah.
Wait, what do you mean by that though?
Listen, before he had his Eurekas, he did have his like Eurekas and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then when he said he was an atheist, he said, don't believe in this, don't believe in that.
Then he went into that?
What happened to him?
Like, dead ass?
Yes.
Like, right after that?
Yes.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was stuck in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And he could only speak through a thing, remember?
What the fuck? Nah.
Because he defied God.
Nah, that's... I never knew that.
You didn't know that?
I thought it was...
This is also like an Andrew Schultz joke too. Like,
oh, okay,
Andrew
yeah.
Schultz talked about it too. Like, isn't it funny the people that
Don't believe.
didn't believe?
Yeah.
The most cursed house in Hollywood.
This case will absolutely enrage you. A judge sent a 3-year-old back to his biological mum to be murdered. A little boy named Curtis from Ohio had been fostered since he was 7 days old. He'd been kindly taken care of by 2 lovely foster parents for 2.5 years. Now, they badly wanted to adopt Curtis and make their roles as parents official. However, they tragically never got the chance. In March 2023, a judge decided that Curtis should be sent back to his biological mum. This decision would prove to be fatal. Just months after he got sent back to Tamika Eggleton on the 14th of June 2023, Curtis was found unresponsive in a pram in a shop. He was rushed to hospital where he sadly passed away. The autopsy confirmed that the injuries that the little boy sustained were blunt force injuries. It was determined that they could not have been done accidentally. 31-year-old Tamika was then arrested and detained on the 19th of the month. She has since pleaded guilty to murdering her biological child. Curtis absolutely had the chance to live a long and happy life with the foster parents that so desperately wanted to adopt him. Tamika is due to be sentenced in July and faces life in prison.
These images have an extremely disturbing backstory. It's a mystery turned into a true crime case. A very, very unique case. You won't want to miss it. Hi, I'm Meg. I talk about true crime. Let's get into this case. The year is 1961, and these men are on a boat in the middle of 2 islands in the Bahamas. Suddenly, they spot something in the water, and they're like, what is that? What they find completely shocks them. It's an 11-year-old girl alone on a dinghy boat. She had been at sea completely alone for over 3 days at this point, and little did they know she had witnessed something horrific. They quickly brought her on board, and she was in pretty rough shape. She hadn't eaten or drank anything in basically 4 days, and she was sunburnt, dehydrated, everything. So she could hardly get any words out at all. She got her name out and not much more. And then she just collapsed and she was out for a while. The men who saved her thought that, she had probably just been on a boat that sunk, but little did they know that that was not the case at all. It was a lot darker than that. This little girl was referred to as the sea orphan, but she had a name. Her name was Terry Jo Dupperalt. And only a few weeks before this incident, 1961, she was living with her family, very happy, normal life. She lived with her brother, sister, mom, and dad. Her dad, Arthur Dupperalt, had always had a dream of taking his family on a cruise around the world. And his dream finally came true when he got them a boat. This boat was called the Bluebell, and their adventure was about to begin. Arthur himself didn't know that much about sailing, so he actually hired his friend to be their captain. His name was Julian Harvey, and he was actually a former World War II pilot. Julian was accompanied by his wife on the Bluebell ship, and she kind of was like the chef on board. So on November 8th of 1961, they all sailed off on the Bluebell to go around the world. Less than a week later, on the 11th of November, a man is spotted in the middle of the ocean on a dinghy boat, and he's yelling, "Please help, I have a dead baby on board." They go to help him, and he did. He had the youngest Dupperalt child unalived in the boat. And this man was none other than Julian, the captain of the Bluebell. Where's the rest of the family? Where's his wife? He claimed that at 8:30 p.m. the night before, a storm hit the Bluebell ship, and he wasn't able to save anyone. He tried to save the youngest Dupperalt child when he found her in the water, but she was already gone. He actually had so many details to his story that it was kind of actually hard to find holes in it. It was hard to question his story. It seemed legit. And there was no one around to say otherwise. That's until a few days later when Terry Jo is found in her lifeboat. And she has a very different story to tell. They had brought Julian in just for questioning. He's literally mid-interview / questioning with the Coast Guard, and someone runs in saying that she's been found. Oh, one of the Dupperalt children have been found. And Julian's apparently he goes, "Oh my God, isn't that wonderful?" Which probably had everybody else in the room kind of Y'all see that reaction? At that point, Julian claimed that he was getting a little bit tired and then he was going to check himself into a motel for the night. Julian does exactly that. He gets a motel, checks in under a fake name, and unalives himself in the motel room. A little bit suspicious if you ask me. He did leave a note, but it didn't really explain anything, like why he did what he did. It just said, "I got too tired and nervous and couldn't stand it any longer." That's what the note said, apparently. Terry Jo, like I said, was not in like a good condition when they found her, but she eventually did regain consciousness. Oh God, I can't speak. And was able to finally tell the real story. So here is that real story. The first few days at sea were peaceful. There didn't seem to be any arguing between anyone. And things were going well. The day before the incident, they were like collecting seashells on beaches and it was all wholesome, seemingly. But then on the 5th night, Terry Jo wakes up to thudding and screaming coming from upstairs. In fact, she could hear her younger brother screaming for his dad's help, which is just like it's just so sad. And the brave little girl that she is, she makes her way above deck. She goes to see what's happening. And that's where she finds her mom and her brother on the floor with blood everywhere. Terrified and probably confused out of her mind on what's happened, she starts looking around probably for her dad, Julian, Mary, or her little sister. And she comes across Julian and he tells her to get below deck. He's like, go back down. She did as told and she goes back below deck, but then it actually starts filling with oily water and she realizes that the boat is sinking and she makes her way back up. She runs into Julian again and she's like, is the boat sinking? And he says, yeah. At this point, the water's like waist high and Julian's apparently holding like a rifle. Julian then instructs her to hold the rope of the dinghy boat while he puts it in the water, but then she accidentally like lets go of the rope and the dinghy boat starts floating off. That's when Julian jumps into the water and gets in the dinghy boat and she watches him as he just drifts away, leaving her on a sinking boat with her family, nowhere to be seen. Well, she obviously knew where her brother and her mom were, but they were not responsive. She had no idea where her father was. She had no idea where her baby sister was, or even Mary, the wife of this man. Where is she? And all that she knew was that she had to get off of this boat. So she did exactly that. She found a little raft boat, gets in it, and drifts off into the ocean on her own. Mind you, she's only 11 years old. She must have been terrifying, and watching as the Bluebell ship sinks and she gets further and further away in a super not stable, tiny little dinghy boat in the middle of the ocean. And this now leads us back to the beginning of the story when she's found. And it's a good thing they found her when she did, because honestly, she probably wouldn't have survived much longer. It's a miracle that they came across her in like how big the ocean is. Now you're probably wondering, like, why did Julian do this? Like, what happened? And why didn't he kill her? Why did he leave her to survive? That is a question that no one really has the answer for, because no one knows why he let her live. She herself says that she thinks, she was survived for a reason, but she'll never really know why he didn't. Now, in terms of the events of that night, people think that this is what happened. So Mary was not Julian's first wife, but his 6th wife. Very Henry VIII of him. And he was broke. He was in a lot of debt, not doing too good, couldn't get a job. And people think that, he took out life insurance on his wife, Mary, and his plan was to unalive her, get that money, and yeah. But they speculate that maybe he tried to do this on the Bluebell and was caught and then had to get rid of everyone involved. That's what they speculate, but we will never actually truly know the answer. I feel just horrible for Terry, like losing your family at that age like that, like losing everyone. It's just unimaginable, and I hope she's doing well today. She apparently did not speak of the accident for over 20 years. She's married with kids, and she's retired. But yeah, that's all for this case. Thanks for watching. I'm glad to be back. Let me know what you want to see next. Bye.
In this video, a mutant Godzilla takes over the world.
Godzilla surfaces in San Francisco final hours of the US. What? my god! Bro, he is flying around. Godzilla should not be able to fly. Bro, relax. Nah, oh my god, look at it. What is that? Oh, I don't even know what's behind. I don't want to know what's behind these black bars. Bro, look at his.
The most mysterious UFO sightings. On August 15th, 1950, Nick Mariana became the first person ever to capture on film footage of a UFO. He captured 2 bright dots streaking across the sky. He contacted newspapers and a local US Air Force base about the event before he got his film developed, which suggests that the tape is in fact authentic. On January 8th, 1981, a retired farmer named Renato Nicolai was working in his garden at home in France when a small saucer-shaped craft about 6.6 feet in diameter dropped from the sky and hovered in front of him for about 30 seconds before disappearing back into the sky. The French government investigated and found evidence that compacting and heating of the soil where the craft appeared happened, along with a black material that wasn't oil, but instead some unknown metallic mixture.
The true story behind Annabelle. Part 5. In 1970, renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren interviewed the 2 nurses, Deidre and her roommate, to see if they could figure out what the Raggedy Ann doll was hiding from them. The Warrens were horrified when they heard that they were treating Annabelle like a real girl, because they knew exactly what she really was.
There's a spirit of a 6-year-old girl in that doll who was killed in an automobile accident just outside of your apartment house here. Well, there was a 6-year-old child by the name of Annabelle who was killed, but God does not allow the spirit of a child to go into a doll. This was a demon.
Warrens conclude that an exorcism is necessary, a Catholic dangerous ritual that Ed is uniquely qualified to perform within the church. The Warrens decide to take Annabelle for safekeeping. On their way home, the Warrens' car suddenly breaks down. As they try to fix it, they turn around to see Annabelle floating in the back seat. This isn't over. You can't hide from me. Follow for more dark origin stories.
This is a real photo of a girl named Annalise Mitchell, whose life inspired the tragic story behind the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Born on September 21st, 1952 in West Germany, Annalise grew up in a devout Roman Catholic family and was known for her deep religious faith. When she was 16, she had a seizure and was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy, and shortly after that, she was diagnosed with depression and treated at a psychiatric hospital. By 1973, when she was 20 years old, her condition became much worse. She would describe seeing devil faces at various times in the day. She would complain of hearing voices while praying, telling her that she will rot in hell, and she even became intolerant of religious places and objects, including the crucifix. After taking psychiatric medicine for 5 years with no sign of improvements, as well as her intolerance to religious objects, Annalise, her family, and the community were all convinced that she was possessed by a demon. As a result, her family asked the Catholic Church to perform an exorcism, and while rejected at first, 2 priests received permission by the local bishop in 1975. So, the family stopped consulting doctors and began performing exorcisms. Annalise very quickly began to worsen physically and mentally. She began displaying aggression, injuring herself and throwing objects. She would drink her own urine off the floor, and she would eat spiders and other insects. After 67 exorcisms over a 10-month period, once or twice a week with each session lasting 4 hours, she began to refuse food and would tragically pass away due to malnourishment and dehydration. At the time of her death on July 1st, 1976, at 23 years old, she weighed only 66 pounds, both of her knees were broken, she was unable to move without assistance, and she was reported to have contracted pneumonia. Annalise's parents and the 2 Roman Catholic priests who conducted conducted these exorcisms were found guilty of negligent homicide. The state recommended that none of the parties involved be jailed, and instead for the priests to be fined and for the parents to be exempt from punishment because they had, quote, suffered enough. Ultimately, they were all sentenced to 6 months in prison, which was later reduced to 3 years probation. The craziest part is, in a conference held 6 years later, German bishops retracted the claim that she was ever even possessed. She truly just needed more psychiatric help that her parents were unfortunately unwilling and too impatient to provide.
So these are the 5 most insane cults and what they actually believed. Number 5, Jonestown. 900 Americans living in a secluded jungle settlement called themselves the People's Temple, and they were led by Reverend Jim Jones. Starting off pretty sane, Jim Jones started to become very, very paranoid. That's why he brought everyone into the jungle. A few American diplomats arrived one day just to check in on everything, and he had them shot. And generally, that's quite a bad political move, so he became very paranoid and ordered all 900 of his followers to drink cyanide-laced Kool-Aid, resulting in mass death known as the Jonestown Massacre. So what did these nutjobs believe? Turns out, basic Christianity with some communist and socialist ideology, and especially an emphasis on racial equality. Number 4, the Solar Temple. The Solar Temple believed that Earth would face an apocalyptic event in the mid-1990s. And so, to get ready for this apocalypse, the believers in the Solar Temple realized they had to achieve a higher spiritual plane. And naturally, the only way they could do this was by unaliving each other and themselves and then setting fire to the buildings that they died in. Obviously. Number 3, Aum Shinrikyo. So it's rush hour, March 1995. 5 bags of nerve agent sarin gas are released onto 3 trains of the Tokyo Underground system. The same gas used by Germans in the Second World War injured 5,800 people and killed 13. Who was the culprit? The cult known as Aum Shinrikyo, which once again was a paranoid doomsday cult that thought the world was going to end, and for some reason the only way to deal with this is by committing a terrorist attack. Basically, their paranoid leader was under the belief that World War III was about to erupt and only the followers of this cult would survive. And this was a very big cult. This had over 10,000 members worldwide at one point. Number 2, the Manson family. So in the late 1960s, the Manson family orchestrated a whole bunch of murders. We all know the story here. But what is crazy is the motive or the belief behind those murders. So Charles Manson, after hearing the song Helter Skelter by the Beatles, believed it was a secretly coded manifesto on an impending race war between white people and black people, which is crazy, but nothing crazier than what Elon Musk tweets on a daily basis. Before I get to number 1, please just drop me a follow. I'd really appreciate it. So, March 1997, 39 bodies all found in a mansion in San Diego. Number 1, Heaven's Gate. So, their leader, Marshall Applewhite, was, of course, good mates with Jesus. He led his small cult to believe that Earth was about to be cleansed, and the only way to escape was to leave your earthly body, and that their souls would escape to a spaceship that was secretly hidden behind the Hale-Bopp comet.
SCP-966, known as the Sleepless Predators, is a Euclid-class anomaly. These creatures exhibit nocturnal predatory behavior and an uncanny ability to prevent sleep in their prey, leading to fatal sleep deprivation. Containment procedures. 4 captured specimens are contained in a 10 by 10 M steel room at Site enhanced with lead lining to block their unique wave emissions. The room is monitored via infrared cameras, and the entities are fed 20 kilograms of meat monthly. Newborns from these specimens are to be studied and euthanized before reaching maturity to prevent population growth. Description: SCP-966 resembles hairless, elongated humanoids with a height of 1.4 to 1.6 meters and a weight up to 30 kilograms. They have digitigrade stance, needle-like teeth, and fragile claws up to 20 centimeters long. Notably, SCP-966 are only visible under infrared light between 700 nanometers and 900 nanometers wavelengths. SCP-966's primary method of hunting involves emitting a unique type of wave, which disrupts the sleep cycle of their prey, completely blocking NREM and REM sleep stages within a 20-meter radius. Victims lose the ability to achieve any restorative sleep, leading to severe physical and mental deterioration. SCP-966 then stalk their weakened prey, sometimes using intimidation tactics to hasten their collapse before consumption. Discovery and background. SCP-966 has been found worldwide, with significant populations in undisclosed regions. Since their discovery in Concerted efforts by the Foundation have reduced their numbers, but they remain widespread and dangerous.
The Hillsborough disaster is one of the most infuriating and heartbreaking true crime cases I know. Hillsborough Stadium is located in Sheffield. It was April 1989. The stadium was about to host an FA Cup semi-final game between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. Now, the game was obviously highly anticipated and there were loads of fans there eager to cheer their teams on. Now, some people actually don't know this, but in 1981 a crush occurred at the ground. This was actually again during a FA Cup game, but it was between Spurs and Wolves. There were 38 injuries, including broken limbs. Luckily no one was killed, but this time the result was fatal. Just prior to kick-off, staff realised there were loads of fans that hadn't yet made it into the ground. Police Commander David Duckenfield ordered that Gate C would be opened. This caused around 2,000 Liverpool fans to surge into the stadium, causing a massive crush. I feel like it's best to get the words of a Hillsborough survivor in order to paint the picture of the true horrors that then unfolded. A Liverpool fan, Neil McDougall, was interviewed. He stated, "I remember watching on in horror and seeing fans on the pitch using advertising hoardings as emergency stretchers. When I looked out across the pitch, it was like a war zone. Bodies were laid out everywhere and they were being carried down to the far end of the stadium. There were people crying everywhere, walking about the pitch in a state of shock." He said, "People were running around in circles in sheer desperation, doing their best to help those who were dying. Every so often you'd hear a small cheer as someone was brought back to life on the pitch, only to fade away again. It was like watching a war scene in a movie, but it wasn't a war, it was only a football match, and those people should have never been killed. They should have been safe. Something went horribly wrong on that day." There were a total of 97 deaths and 766 injuries. Now, not only were the deaths themselves an absolute tragedy, but the way that it was handled by police and other professionals was absolutely horrendous. There was complete chaos in identifying the deceased victims. Bodies of people's loved ones were transported to a local gymnasium which acted as a temporary mortuary. Some relatives were made to look through Polaroid pictures of the deceased to identify their loved ones. Other relatives were placed in a holding room and a hospital administrator came out, stood on a table and started reading descriptions of people in the mortuary. The oldest victim was 67 and the youngest was just 10. Now, in the immediate aftermath of this horrendous tragedy, police and the press spread false stories painting the victims as perpetrators of crimes. The Sun newspaper is now infamous of the absolutely disgusting false stories that they printed about the victims. They lied and made out like the victims were somehow to blame for this, when in actual fact it was a failure of crowd control. The first inquest into the disaster from 1991 stated a verdict of accidental death. Fans and loved ones of the deceased fought to have this overturned for years. Finally, in 2016, it was concluded that the victims were unlawfully killed. Fans played no part in the deaths and instead it was down to police failures, poor stadium design and a delayed response by the ambulance. There's an absolutely brilliant drama on ITV called Anne, and if you're interested in this disaster, it paints such a good picture of what actually happened and how heartbreaking it was. But just as a disclaimer, I did cry the whole way through.
Nobody really knows how the last megalodon died until just a few days ago when a scientist made a terrifying discovery.
No way.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Tony is a renowned marine biologist from Florida who is studying ancient remains of megalodon teeth to find out where they came from. After running a few tests, he concluded that they all came from a zone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He decided to find out the truth for himself, so he set out into the ocean with a special boat meant to analyze the ocean floor. When he entered the region where the teeth came from, he got in his submarine and submerged down. On his way down, Tony described hearing some terrifying sounds which he has never heard before from any creature. But this is fairly common for submarine divers, so he ignored it. After an hour of exploration, he had not found anything and was ready to head back up. This is when two massive sharks appeared out of the dark and began circling the submarine. They were nearly 65 feet, as Tony described it. He panicked as this might be the end for him, but moments later, an even larger shark emerged, ripped the other two in half, and swallowed them, and then disappeared. He was in disbelief and managed to capture it all on camera. To see the footage, click on share, then more, and then photos.
Aiden got FaceTimed by Kai and he was like, "Yo, I'm pulling up to the warehouse right now. Send me the Addy."
Are you actually serious?
Yeah, send me the Addy, bro.
You gotta pull up to the warehouse right now.
And he was on FaceTime. And then he said, once he knew he was on stream, he exited the call. Aiden called Kai. "Yo, did you just call me?" "No."
Yo. Was that you that just called me?
I didn't call you.
Don't fucking troll me, bro.
I didn't call you.
Brother, this AI shit's getting... Dude, somebody just called me off your line and said, yo, send me the address to the warehouse.
Damn.